Hello YouTube, today we are reviewing Smolov. I was actually envisaging doing a review of the Greek God program by Kinobody, then I realized it was $80, and because I actually respect intellectual property, I did not want to pirate it. But I can say also that any program that costs $80 is not worth getting, so that will be the review for any type of Kinobody program. Don't buy them, they're most likely not worth the price. So as far as Smolov goes, it is purely a strength program. I do not delve into strength on this channel. Other people have specific powerlifting dedicated content, and you should go see them if you want to learn about strength because they know what they're talking about. But I have a lot of people on this channel who know that I only do bodybuilding who asked me for a review. So I'm going to base this review around what I do best, which is hypertrophy. So we're going to review Smolov around that notion. Is it going to help you get your legs bigger? I've done the same thing when I reviewed Widowmaker squats and squat every day. They're usually strength techniques, strength focused programs to add pound on the bar, but they can also serve as muscle building because when you build strength, you build muscle at the same time. And if there is one body part that natural powerlifters have that are usually hugely developed, it's their quads. They usually have massive quads. So natural bodybuilders can learn from that. So we're going to discuss this. The Smolov cycle is 30 weeks and it's cut in different cycles that are going to lead you to trying to see what your true 1 rep max is. Which also means that when you start the program, you have to know what your 1 rep max is, which also means you have to know your 1 rep max. I personally don't know my 1 rep max, which also means that people who are usually not used to doing max effort for only 1 rep might go into this program a little bit undertrained and they might undershoot. Because for example, right now I'm working with 375 for 6 on the squats. If I plug that into a calculator, it's either going to give me a 1 rep max for people who are used to 1 rep maxes that I'm not going to be able to hit, or it's going to way undershoot it, or rather I will do that because I won't be able to do their 1 rep max. So I'm going to put something on the bar that I can do right now, but with time I'm going to get better at 1 rep maxes, at the technical action of the 1 rep max faster than the program is making me suffer through. So it's not going to test me where it should test me. In a sense, a lot of programs have that issue where you plug in numbers but you evolve too fast and you end up outgrowing the program in a sense because it's not as challenging as it should be. And Smolov is supposed to be challenging. Let me also say that as far as muscle groups that you can build with minimalist training without really thinking about it much, the legs are in that category where hamstrings, glutes, quads, if you do deadlifts and squat, they're gonna grow. You can add variations or anything, but it's sort of, it's bittersweet because it's simple, but it's not easy. Doing heavy squats, heavy deadlifts all the time, it's tough. But in a sense, it's a huge gain of time for any natural bodybuilder. Why? Because heavy squats and heavy deadlifts don't take that much space in your program. Once you're done, you accumulate a ton of tonnage, you're tired, so the frequency can be too high and the gains are huge from high intensity work. So you can put more upper body work that requires more volume and more sets and reps in there, and you don't end up spending 4 hours in the gym every day. Now that the introduction is out of the way, let's talk about Smolov. So phase 1, the first 2 weeks, you're going to get used to heavy squats. So in a sense, they also understand that not everyone is used to 1 rep maxes, or we're not all used to pushing our max all the time. They also said that it won't be challenging. So the risk for injury is going to be greatly reduced, and that's great. Too many programs push you into deep waters for week 1, and that's always a recipe for disaster. You never want to do that. You need what is called an acclimatation period when a program begins, especially if it's within cycles and the program has a deadline. For programs that don't have a deadline, usually the acclimatation period is going to be much longer because you're going to have to get used to the variations, to the volume. You're going to be able to, especially if you do evolving rep ranges, you need to be able to calculate how it's going to fall into place. But for a program that's 30 weeks, they don't have that much time to get you into shape, right? So 2 weeks for me seems reasonable. They talk about stretching your legs. I'm not a big proponent of stretching. If you like to stretch. I personally don't think it's that useful. And they also say you can mix in some accessory because since it's light, you're not getting much volume, you're not getting super high intensity work, so you might not be really tiring the leg as much as you could. And they're telling you that's fine, you can complete it with other movements, like lunges, for example. But you could also, if you wanted, do deadlift. Now, the issue with Smolov and that type of programs in general, they expect you to put all of your eggs in the same basket, meaning that most of your energy is going to go towards that. And that's normal because you're trying to get very technical and very good at one lift. You cannot do everything, right? Even for powerlifters, good powerlifters, they do 3 lifts, but you end up realizing at some point that even that at some point can be too much because you need to be the best you can at the 3 lifts. So it's a game of trying to program everything so that everything progresses. If you talk to powerlifters, some of them will tell you that sometimes they have to make sacrifices. Sometimes you have to look at one of the lifts and say, okay, I'm not going to focus on that for now. And this is where this mentality comes from of trying to progress on one and keeping the other stable. This is not a good mentality to have for bodybuilding. Let me tell you right now, I talk a lot about tonnage progression, but the issue with bodybuilding is that if you want a complete physique, you don't only do 3 lifts, or rather, you don't only do 3 movement patterns, because in a sense, powerlifters don't only do 3 lifts. Some of the variations are not the big 3, but there are similar movement patterns. You as a bodybuilder are going to do curls, you're going to do behind the neck, tricep extensions, you're going to do some calf raises, you're going to do a lot of things that are going to add to the mix of movement patterns that you have to practice week in and week out. So if you decide that you're going to put a lot of energy in knee flexions, understand that the rest of the body will suffer. And if it doesn't, most likely you're not going to get the results you want from that. But it's also possible that you're someone who has a huge weak point when it comes to quads and you want to catch up. And if that's the case, that could be good. So that's your first 2 weeks where you get acclimated. Then there's the base cycle, that's heavy squats 4 days a week. And the base cycle is going to take from 3 to 6 weeks. So you do heavy squats 4 days a week. That's a lot of frequency, especially with heavy squats. I personally could not handle that. Let me tell you right now. They say that you're going to get hungrier. That's true. You need to fuel the workouts. And then they talk about the week-to-week increase. And they talk about slapping an extra 20 pounds on the bar. That's a lot of weight, especially for people who are already intermediate in squats and knee flexions. That might not be realistic. That's also the issue with that type of program. Some people, or a big portion of people, jump in them when they're still novices. So they're still getting fed noob gains, or they enter massive bulks. The difference between someone like me, for example, who tried to run Smolov at maintenance and someone who would just eat as much as they could would be night and day, right? Because the person would not only get bigger, so their leverages would get better and the weight that they can push into the bar would get heavier, but they would always be at top recovery speed, while I might not be. Keep that in mind also if you want to run Smolov. The environment surrounding the execution of the program needs to be just right. So they talk about that, they talk about weight progression, and they say it should be challenging, and it will. So this is where the program starts becoming a potential hindrance for the rest of the training, because that amount of knee flexion is going to consume your recovery. I highly doubt that anyone could do heavy pulls on top of that, even some vertical presses because your lower back is going to be fried. Forget doing any type of other knee flexions because basically the base cycle is that. They don't tell you to do any other accessories or other leg movements, so you're going to do only that heavy squats. And for some people that could create imbalances because some people, and I would even say the majority of people, you're not going to get the best hamstring development from knee flexions. That's what hip hinges are for. So you're going to get a lot of quads. The issue when you get a lot of quads is you are basically priming yourself for a knee injury. Add to that you're going to get a lot of wear and tear on the knees with that program because you squat heavy 4 days a week. So it can be a potential injury maker. But I'm not going to discuss too much the percentages and stuff because that's just strength. I'm just talking about the parameters of hypertrophy that surround it. That being said, from what I see here, you're going to get a lot of volume in, of course, and it's going to build your legs. There's no way around it. After that, you enter the switching phase, which the switching phase is 7 to 8 weeks. And in the switching phase, you give your legs a rest. You focus on dynamic effort lifting. So what you basically do is you take 60% and you focus on speed out of the bottom of the squat. I'm not going to discuss too much weak points on the squat because this is mostly strength related. I do agree with the notion that a lot of people who think that they fail mid-squat, they don't really fail mid-squat. It's that they failed to properly get the velocity at the bottom and transmit it into the bar to get through that sticking point. It's the same for the bench. You rarely have issues locking out the bench because you have weak triceps. You have issues because you're not fast off the chest. That's pretty much my experience with those two lifts. So they also say that this is where you can try some variations, and that's going to be good. The issue, again, is tonnage stability. This is what Smolov makes you do. It makes you start here at base, then it goes into overdrive. It starts here at the what they call phase in. Then base cycle is a huge uptick in tonnage, and then switching phase is going to do this again. That's great for strength. That's what strength is. You have cycles and you peak. And peaking doesn't really mean doing this most of the time. Within a peaking cycle, you're going to peak as a preparation, right? So what I mean is that it's not always a slow rise to 1 rep max. It's not that easy to build strength. It's not that simple. But for bodybuilding, you want this. You want something stable. You can have very small downward motions if you make a sacrifice in tonnage to promote something else, or if you have a huge volume session that's coming next week and you need that recovery to be at peak, but it never dips completely, it stays here. If it dips, it means either that you renounced training the body part or you got injured, which both cases are pretty dramatic. So, switching phase, you do your thing, you can try some box squats, that's great. After that, you do what they call the intense cycle, which is 8 to 12 weeks. And during that, you get back into it. You're dialing back. And they say that that's when the loads are heaviest, basically. And they say it's going to suck. And they also say you shouldn't fail reps consistently. My philosophy is never fail a rep. If I fail a rep, something went really wrong because it means that my calculus were just off. The issue with failing reps, I'll make a video about it. There's too many to count. Injury risk is super high when you fail a rep, even if you know how to fail. For people who don't know how to fail, you're pretty much guaranteed to get injured. I'm exaggerating a little bit. It kills you mentally. It destroys your ability to do volume afterwards. It just takes time to reset everything. It's not something you want to happen all the time. If you fail a lift every week or other week, there's something wrong with the program. But basically here, what you do is you're going to warm up and then you're eventually going to do 3x4s at 95% intensity. That's very high intensity, still rep work. So you're still not doing 1 rep maxes. So you're still getting a lot of quality tonnage. And within the set, you start the set at 95%, but it's an average, right? Because the first rep might not be 95% and it might be lower, and the last rep might be higher because intensity is boosted throughout the set because you get tired. All right, so that's again a huge block of hypertrophy for the quads. The quads are going to be big, but you're also going to get potentially some knee pain in there. And then taper week. So basically you squat just to keep the technique in, but it's rather low volume, not low intensity. You still get some intensity, but it's low volume. And then you prepare for that big test of the 1 rep max. So, what was the goal of Smolov? What is the actual goal of it? It's to increase your squat. That's pretty much self-evident. For powerlifters, it has its own goal, it's to accumulate points. But what about bodybuilders? Why do we want to increase our lifts? We want to increase our lifts to increase our base strength. Because getting stronger at lower body lifts is going to feed into every direction and allow you to put more weight on the bar everywhere. Why do we want more weight on the bar? Because it's going to promote tonnage. And why do we promote tonnage? Because the more tonnage you feed the muscle, the bigger they get. Does it equate saying the stronger you get, the bigger your muscles get? Not necessarily. But if you get strong within the parameters of a program that promotes tonnage, it will. That's a misconception many people have. Does this program promote what I just described? Yes and no. Yes, because within the program itself, when you built your strength, you accumulated that tonnage. So it was done. Basically, the method that led to the goal accomplished the goal. It's self-evident. And no, why? Because this is not going to be sustainable for the most part. Meaning what? You build your strength with that method. Are you going to be able to maintain that strength without maintaining the high tonnage that you did? That's sort of a rhetorical question, right? Because a lot of people might. It might be possible. It might be just by repeating sets at a high intensity with the same weight. That being said, when you're going to re-enter the parameters of a bodybuilding program, you will not be able to feed all of the tonnage to the legs as you did with Smolov. So you might see a decrease in size because you suddenly cut off the tonnage, and you might see a decrease in strength. Is it the end of the wood? No, because you're going to maintain a lot of it. So the logic would be you run a Smolov cycle here and there to increase your strength. You do your best to maintain a perfect knee structural integrity to not get injured. You still get some hip hinges in to not get too imbalanced, but you basically make a sacrifice during a 30-week period to get a bigger squat that is then going to be used to have a huge uptick in tonnage, and then you try to maintain that as hard as you can. I think it's doable. I don't think it's unrealistic. I personally did that with my biceps, where I would curl every day all the time. They would fed massive amounts of tonnage, they grew from it, and then eventually I realized, okay, I can't keep doing that because I need to work all the parts of my body that are neglected, so I stopped. The biceps didn't grow smaller and they didn't lose strength. I still give them a lot of tonnage, a lot of weight, a lot of sets and reps, but I don't do nearly as much as I used to do. So I found the sweet spot. I found the spot where I don't lose anything and I can maintain a very slow progression with a muscle group that's still very strong and dominant. And I think that the same can be done with the legs. The only difference is, compared to a bicep, a leg is naturally much stronger and will naturally accumulate more tonnage. So when you try and balance that out, keep that in mind, because the amount of tonnage you might have to feed it to keep it stable so that it doesn't shrink, and to keep the strength is going to be different than with a smaller muscle group. So that's going to be my review of Smolov. I actually think it's not a bad protocol to follow. It is much more extreme and demanding than squat every day and the Widowmaker squats, which are sort of more reasonable, less extremist, less all the eggs in the same basket methods to get bigger quads. This is much more of a focused intent to get the squats to grow. So depending on your personality, depending on your goals, that might be something you might want to envision. And if you want to know how to run it exactly, I'm going to put it in the description. That's it for the day. Thank you for watching. See you soon.